For decades, the royal pearl set was whispered about behind palace walls, its legacy tied to loyalty, betrayal, and unspoken deals. But no one expected Zara Tindall, once considered distant from the crown's political affairs, to make the boldest move yet. She didn't just hand over the pearls, she sent shockwaves through the monarchy by rejecting Camilla's personal plea. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. There are treasures in the monarchy not measured by diamonds or gold, but by the weight of history they carry. The royal pearl set was one of them. Worn only by those closest to the sovereign, its origin stretches back generations, gifted to Queen Mary, restored by Queen Elizabeth II, and always cloaked in quiet reverence. What made this necklace different wasn't just the craftsmanship or the rare pearls, it was the unspoken rule that only a woman considered a protector of the crown would ever wear it. And with Queen Elizabeth's passing, its fate became the subject of hushed speculation across the highest echelons of the monarchy. That silence broke the moment it appeared around the neck of the Princess of Wales. The shock wasn't just in the sight of the pearls, it was in the realization of who gave them to her. Zara Tindall, known more for her Olympic medals and equestrian prestige than royal politics, had remained neutral for years, rarely aligning publicly with palace factions. But behind that quiet strength was a bond forged not in pageantry, but in principle. Few knew that Zara had once made a private vow to her grandmother, the late Queen, to safeguard the jewels until the right moment. That moment came not with a ceremony, but with a decision, one that would pit her directly against Camilla, Queen Consort. Camilla, whose ascent to power was marked by strategic patience and relentless reinvention, had long coveted the royal pearl set for a high-profile diplomatic event. Palace insiders reveal she had made a discreet request to borrow the necklace for the occasion, under the belief that it rightfully belonged to the consort. What she didn't anticipate was Zara's answer, a firm and unshakable no. It wasn't just denial, it was defiance. It was Zara drawing a line that had remained invisible for years, now illuminated in unmistakable clarity. How Zara came to possess the pearls is a story still shrouded in layers of confidentiality. Some claim they were passed to her by Queen Elizabeth in private, while others believe they were stored in a sealed family vault, accessible only by a select few. What's clear is that Zara held onto them not for herself, but for someone she believed embodied the Queen's ideals. Catherine had long admired the necklace in silence, understanding its meaning without ever needing to voice it. The pearls represented not just elegance, but legacy, and Zara saw in Catherine the same quiet fortitude that once defined the monarchy's most respected matriarch. The moment Zara chose to bestow the pearls upon Catherine, the royal landscape began to quake. Whispers erupted behind palace doors, alliances strained, and Camilla's composure wavered. What had once been a symbolic heirloom became a weapon of legacy, a declaration that loyalty could no longer be claimed. It had to be proven, and Zara had just proven hers. But it wasn't just a gift, it was a coded message. And once Catherine accepted the pearls, the game shifted entirely. Behind her calm equestrian demeanor, Zara Tindall made a move that left even palace veterans stunned. By bypassing royal protocol and refusing Camilla's request, she unleashed a quiet rebellion, one that began years ago and only now has surfaced. Zara was never meant to be a player in the palace's strategic games. She was the outsider within the Queen's granddaughter, yet unburdened by titles, the one who could have lived a quiet life in the country, far from the weight of royal expectations. But Queen Elizabeth saw something more in her, a fierce independence, a loyalty that couldn't be manipulated, and a strength that didn't need to be paraded. Behind closed doors, it was Zara who often sat with her grandmother in unguarded moments, who listened to the stories that weren't meant for official record. The Queen trusted her with more than just words, she trusted her with judgment, and that judgment would later become the monarchy's reckoning. Over the years, tension had quietly built between Zara and Camilla, always simmering, never public. Zara had never approved of Camilla's increasingly assertive hold over royal narratives, especially when it involved the marginalization of those the Queen once held close. Decisions around public funding, charity prioritization, and family access were subtly reshaped under Camilla's influence. And while most bowed to the winds of change, Zara didn't. She had witnessed enough to know that loyalty to the crown didn't mean loyalty to the person wearing it, especially when that person had rewritten their own legacy. But it wasn't only resistance, it was connection. Zara had formed a silent, powerful bond with Catherine, a bond rooted not in titles, but in the shared experience of raising children under scrutiny, of maintaining dignity while weathering emotional storms. Their friendship was forged in the quiet moments, away from ceremony. While the world speculated on alliances between powerhouses, the most unbreakable connection was being formed between two women whose integrity never needed performance. Zara saw in Catherine what she'd seen in her grandmother: steadiness, grace under pressure, and a sense of duty that never screamed for attention. In time, Zara began to slowly and deliberately pull herself out from Camilla's shadow. She declined certain appearances, redirected attention away from projects Camilla championed, and refused to lend her name to causes that felt like performative unity. It didn't go unnoticed. Camilla attempted to reassert influence through private gestures, gifting access, offering opportunities, even suggesting shared engagements. But Zara never responded. The more Camilla extended her hand, the more Zara withdrew, until it became clear that no amount of royal favor could sway her. Her loyalty wasn't to titles, and it certainly wasn't to hierarchy. It was personal, and the pearl, set priceless, historic, symbolic, became her final answer. When she handed the pearls to Catherine, she wasn't simply gifting jewelry, she was declaring allegiance, not to the institution, but to the woman she believed deserved to represent it. That decision carried the weight of everything she had seen, heard, and endured. It was a final stand cloaked in elegance, a quiet rebellion that would echo through the House of Windsor with devastating clarity. As the pearls rested against Catherine's collarbone, whispers turned into panic behind palace doors, especially for Camilla. When Camilla reached out to Zara in a private, handwritten letter, no one anticipated what followed. Not only did Zara say no, she didn't mince words. The future queen consort was denied, and her humiliation was swift, sharp, and irreversible. It began under the pretense of civility, a carefully scripted message inked on royal stationery and delivered through the oldest form of diplomacy, the personal touch. Camilla's letter, described by insiders as both pleading and patronizing, made a formal request to wear the royal pearl set during an upcoming international state visit. She framed it as tradition, as necessity, as continuity. But beneath the elegance of her words was something more pressing, a desire to assert dominance in a palace now quietly realigning. Camilla needed a symbol to re-cement her authority, and the pearls, with their whispers of legacy and quiet approval from the late queen, were the perfect weapon. Zara read the letter once, then again, and instead of responding through intermediaries, palace secretaries, or vague protocol, she penned her answer with stunning clarity. The answer was no. Not out of spite, not out of rivalry, but out of principle. In her note, she reportedly questioned the sincerity of the request and the motives behind it. She made it clear that the pearls weren't to be used as props to salvage public perception, nor to bolster a role that had, in her view, drifted too far from the values her grandmother once embodied. It wasn't just a rejection, it was a reckoning. Camilla, blindsided and unprepared for resistance from within the family, turned to her closest allies. Whispered calls were made. Meetings were hastily arranged. Aides from Clarence's house reached out to Zara, offering to clarify the queen consort's intent, suggesting that unity was more vital now than ever. But Zara didn't flinch. She ignored the pressure, refused follow-up attempts, and stood firm, even as the institution rattled behind the scenes. The shock rippled fast, and within days, a confidential message exchange between two senior courtiers was leaked, an exchange that painted Camilla as deeply shaken and humiliated by the audacity. Through it all, Catherine remained silent. She neither confirmed nor denied any of the growing rumors. She made no comment, issued no statement. Her silence spoke louder than words. There was no need to defend, explain, or justify the gift, because by then, the public had already decided what the gesture meant, and just when the storm of speculation seemed to reach its peak, Zara delivered the final blow in the form of a quiet, private whisper to Catherine. "They were always meant for you." That single line, shared in hushed tones, echoed louder than any royal decree. It confirmed everything without revealing anything. It wrapped decades of loyalty, judgment, and inheritance into one chilling truth that even without a throne, Zara had made a decision more powerful than any monarch could override. But while the rejection stunned the court, it also uncovered something much darker, a secret history behind the pearls. Tea changed everything. Buried in Queen Elizabeth's personal estate files was a clause so unexpected it redefined Zara's place in royal history. It wasn't just about inheritance. It was about trust, loyalty, and a future. The Queen secretly envisioned. It surfaced quietly, discovered not in a grand unveiling but in a confidential review of Her Majesty's handwritten, will meticulously preserved, unseen by most, and coded with references that only a few would understand. Among the more conventional instructions, one phrase stood out like a dagger in a velvet box, the protector's gift. Attached to it was a sealed note, directed not to a reigning monarch or senior official, but to Zara Tindall, her granddaughter, her confidant, and, as it would turn out, her chosen guardian of legacy. In it, the Queen made no mention of titles or lineage. Instead, she spoke of values. She tasked Zara with a role that surpassed rank, to safeguard the royal pearl set until the time came to pass it to its rightful wearer. One not chosen by crown, but by character. Zara's breath must have caught as she read the words written in her grandmother's firm yet fading script. There, in unmistakable ink, was a promise she had silently honoured for years. The Queen had made it clear the pearls were not to be auctioned, displayed, or passed on for political optics. They were a test, and with them, Zara carried not just the weight of tradition, but the burden of prophecy. What few knew was that years earlier, during a rare private walk at Balmoral, the Queen had pulled Catherine aside. Their conversation was short, almost cryptic, but it ended with a remark that lingered in Catherine's mind ever since. Not all crowns sit on heads. It would be years before she understood what it meant. Palace aides, those few who had been granted access to the Queen's estate intentions, chose silence. They knew the implications. To release that document would cast shadows on Camilla's authority, ignite a firestorm of comparisons, and destabilize the carefully manicured image of harmony within the royal household. And yet, the Queen's decision had been final. Camilla's name was absent from every mention surrounding the pearls. There was no ambiguity, no loophole. The Queen had spoken, not with public declaration, but with deliberate omission, a silence more deafening than any spoken word. For Zara, upholding that wish was not a question of preference, but of principle. She had watched the monarchy evolve, bend, and fracture. But through it all, she had clung to one unshakable truth. Loyalty wasn't owed to position but to purpose. And now, with the Queen's written command behind her, she knew exactly why she had refused Camilla and why the pearls had never belonged to her. They were a signal not of possession but of protection. A shield passed from one generation to the next, guarding not who ruled but who was right. The Queen's wishes did more than clarify ownership. They sparked a battle for legitimacy that neither side was ready to confront. The moment the pearls touched her skin, Catherine felt the weight not just of jewels, but of generations. Her acceptance wasn't flashy, but it was absolute, and behind her poise was a quiet acknowledgement of the storm it would unleash. Zara didn't make a grand gesture. No audience, no ceremony, just a private moment between two women who knew the burden of the crown without needing to wear it. Catherine's eyes didn't widen in surprise. She knew what was coming long before the pearls were placed in her hands. Still, her breath caught. It wasn't just a necklace, it was a transfer of trust. One woman acting on the silent will of a queen, the other receiving the weight of a legacy passed through shadows, not speeches. Catherine's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them around her neck, not out of fear, but because she knew what would follow. Accepting the pearls was an act of quiet defiance, not to the monarchy itself, but to the version of it Camilla had carefully constructed. Catherine wasn't trying to compete, but the symbolism of the moment, captured by a single photograph that later leaked to the press, ignited a frenzy. Her team had to work quickly. There were no statements issued, no clarifications given. The strategy was simple: say nothing and let the moment speak. Catherine wasn't claiming power. She didn't need to. The pearls did that for her. Behind palace doors, the mood was different. William, long weary of the tension between his stepmother and his wife, offered unwavering support. "She's not replacing anyone," he was overheard telling a senior aide. "She's just becoming who she was always meant to be." His words, like his father's silence, only added fuel to a public already stirred by the imagery. In online forums, newspapers, and whispered social circles, the verdict was delivered. Catherine was the spiritual successor to Queen Elizabeth, not because of blood, but because of bearing. And that bearing was tested almost immediately. Days later, a royal engagement brought Catherine and Camilla onto the same calendar. Only one showed up. Catherine arrived wearing the pearl set, subtly but unmistakably. Camilla, scheduled to appear beside her, withdrew at the last minute. Official statements cited health. Unofficial whispers said otherwise. No one needed to say it aloud, but everyone understood the balance had shifted. Camilla had been challenged, not through rebellion, but through restraint. And it was that restraint that made Catherine's presence all the more commanding. Through it all, Catherine remained composed, never once acknowledging the chaos spiraling around her. That was her gift, grace under fire, silence as a sword. She didn't chase attention, she embodied it, and with every public appearance, every nod to tradition, every silent walk through palace corridors, she reinforced the idea that perhaps the monarchy's future wasn't about who wore the crown, but who carried its weight best. But even as Catherine stood calm in public, palace corridors were on fire because Camilla wasn't done fighting. Humiliated and cornered, Camilla launched a last-minute plan to reclaim her image. But the more she pushed, the more she lost. And what followed wasn't just a failed PR stunt, it was a turning point in her royal downfall. In the weeks following Zara's bold gift to Catherine, Camilla's silence had been deafening, but behind the scenes, her camp was in overdrive. With public sentiment shifting and whispers of Queen Elizabeth's secret intentions gaining traction, Camilla's team crafted what they believed would be a redemptive masterstroke. A leaked story cleverly planted across several sympathetic media outlets claimed that Camilla had generously offered her own heirloom tiara to Catherine as a symbol of unity and maternal affection. It was a carefully worded piece, brimming with elegance and staged humility. But it was also a lie. There had been no offer, no tiara, just a desperate attempt to rewrite the narrative and paint Camilla as the gracious queen trying to heal a fabricated rift. But the public wasn't buying it. The timing was too perfect, the sentiment too polished. And when details emerged contradicting the story, when sources close to Catherine quietly confirmed that no such gesture had taken place, the backlash was immediate. Social media erupted, headlines turned, commentators who once offered neutral takes began questioning the Queen Consort's credibility. Worse still, long-time courtiers who had supported Camilla began to step back, unwilling to defend what they knew was a manufactured illusion. Approval numbers dipped. Invitations became fewer. The once confident matriarch of the monarchy was suddenly adrift, watching her grip on public favor and internal loyalty slip through her fingers. Then came the footage. Grainy, distant, but unmistakably real. A leaked video from Windsor Castle captured a tense moment between Camilla and Zara. No words could be heard, but the body language said everything. Camilla's frustration boiled under a composed smile. Zara, arms crossed, stood unflinching. A firm shake of the head. A dismissive turn. It lasted less than 30 seconds but was replayed across every major network. Analysts dissected it frame by frame. And the consensus was damning. Zara hadn't just rejected Camilla's request for the pearls. She had rejected her influence altogether. That moment, combined with mounting whispers about Queen Elizabeth's sealed documents and the visible unity between Zara, Catherine, and Princess Anne, sparked something irreversible. A narrative took hold, one that Camilla could no longer control. The Queen, they said, had chosen her legacy well before her death, and it had never been about hierarchy or titles. It had been about who could carry the torch with honor. Camilla, once the woman who defied scandal to ascend the throne, was now the figure overshadowed by the one who never sought the spotlight but had become its rightful bearer. As Camilla faded from the spotlight, another royal voice emerged, one that sealed the matter permanently. When Princess Anne speaks, the palace listens. Her unexpected entrance into the Pearl drama was short, sharp, and definitive, and her words didn't just support Zara, they ended any hope Camilla had of reclaiming the crown's symbolic legacy. The room was silent when Anne stood up during the closed-door family meeting. Charles had tried to downplay the growing tension, insisting that the issue was being exaggerated by the press and misinterpreted by the public. But Anne wasn't interested in preserving optics. She had watched long enough. With her trademark bluntness, she turned to her brother and, in front of key senior royals, uttered the words that would ripple through the monarchy. Zara acted as mother would have wanted. No defense, no elaboration. Just a single sentence that dismantled weeks of spin, silenced attempts at narrative control, and made the Queen's wishes unmistakably clear. Anne's relationship with Catherine had always been one of mutual respect, both women more focused on duty than drama. But behind the scenes, it had deepened into something stronger. Anne, known for her refusal to suffer fools and her allergy to flattery, had seen in Catherine a quiet resilience that mirrored her own. It was Anne who had defended Catherine's choice to remain composed in the face of endless media pressure. It was Anne who advised Zara to hold her ground. And now, it was Anne who stood between Camilla and the last shred of symbolic influence she clung to. Days later, an event hosted by Camilla, intended to celebrate continuity and unity within the royal household, was noticeably missing one name from its guest list: Anne. Officially, it was said she had a prior engagement, but sources close to the palace confirmed otherwise. She had declined explicitly and without apology. Her absence was louder than a statement. It sent a message not only to Camilla, but to the entire institution. Loyalty, legacy, and integrity would no longer be compromised for convenience. Within hours, that message began to take hold. Courtiers, once hesitant to pick a side, started distancing themselves from Camilla's media operations. Internal briefings took on a new tone. Discussions about succession optics suddenly favored Catherine's image as the embodiment of the Queen's vision. Anne didn't need to orchestrate a campaign, her presence and absence did the work for her. And when word of her comment at the family meeting leaked to the press, it solidified the shift. Public discourse tilted, opinion polls surged. The narrative was no longer about whether Catherine was being elevated, it was about when Camilla, sensing the tide, tried to regain footing, but the blow had already landed. She had been outmaneuvered, not by scandal, but by silence, not by aggression, but by unshakable truth. Anne's endorsement, subtle as it seemed, was the final piece. With it, the legacy Queen Elizabeth intended no longer felt disputed, it felt inevitable. But it wasn't over just yet. One last revelation would shake the monarchy deeper than any before. Sealed and forgotten inside a locked drawer in Balmoral, a letter surfaced signed by Queen Elizabeth herself. Its contents weren't just shocking, they were seismic, because in it, Her Majesty named the one woman she trusted most to uphold the legacy. And it wasn't Camilla. It began with a simple audit, a routine estate review, following a quiet legal inquiry into undisclosed heirlooms believed to still be in royal possession. But what was uncovered went far beyond antique inventories or misplaced documents. Tucked beneath a stack of handwritten notes was a sealed envelope, aged but untouched. The handwriting was unmistakable, the royal cipher etched in gold, and the recipient's name scrawled in deliberate, personal ink: Catherine. The contents, read only by a handful of senior aides and ultimately confirmed through palace verification, detailed the Queen's private intentions for her most meaningful possessions, including the royal pearl set. But more than that, it spoke to who the Queen believed had earned the right to continue her legacy of strength, restraint, and duty. She wrote not about titles, but about womanhood in service. She didn't mention succession, but referred instead to spirit. And in her own words, she called Catherine the embodiment of quiet resolve. Within the letter was a list carefully noted, item by item, of personal royal artifacts the Queen wished to go to Catherine in the years following her passing. Among them, the royal pearl set, a brooch worn at her silver jubilee, a prayer book given to her by Queen Mary. They were not just relics, they were symbols, passed through generations of women who held the monarchy together from behind the scenes. But perhaps most stunning was the inclusion of Zara's name not as a recipient, but as a guardian of the Queen's personal legacy. It was a role given not out of obligation, but out of trust. The letter revealed that the Queen had tasked Zara with protecting these items until she felt the time was right to pass them on, which meant Zara's gift to Catherine wasn't spontaneous. It was preordained. The question remained, why was the letter hidden? Why had no one spoken of it until now? Insiders say the letter was known only to 2 senior aides, both sworn to secrecy and bound by legal restrictions until the estate review required full disclosure. Once uncovered, its existence was no longer deniable. The contents were shown to King Charles, Princess Anne, and Prince William. No objections were raised, only silence. And in that silence, the truth became impossible to suppress. Camilla, once prepared to fight for her place in the monarchy's symbolic lineage, withdrew from public view. There were no rebuttals, no press briefings, just an absence that confirmed everything the letter had already declared. As the letter's existence quietly made its way through palace channels, one unshakable truth settled across the monarchy like a final curtain drop. The Queen had made her choice not through policy or proclamation, but through pen and paper. And her choice wasn't Camilla, it was Catherine, not by blood, but by belief. And now, with the pearls around her neck, that belief had become fact. And as the curtain closes on this chapter, a single truth remains: loyalty never needed a crown, only a cause. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.